How is everybody doing? Welcome to a live podcast here on the Basketball Zone YouTube channel. Got my boy Robert Mishovic to cover five potential interesting hot takes because we all know we love some hot takes, especially when we're going to the Eastern Conference Finals. We still got some time to evaluate some prospects. We won't touch much on that. That's a separate show. We might touch on it a little bit towards the end, maybe our favorite guys, whatever. But this show is mainly about five potential trades that Robert came up with. He put on his GM hat on. Luckily, Vivek won't put him as the assistant GM because he put his daughter, he assigned her as the assistant GM of the Stockton Kings, which is an embarrassment. But it didn't surprise me. Robert, how you doing, brother? How you feeling? How's the offseason going for you?
It's going well, man. I'm excited about what I'm seeing in the playoffs and how it
Me too.
relates to the Toronto Raptors going forward. It's been exciting playoffs. Every team that was supposed to win is out, right? And I mean, the Clippers were out from day one. The Lakers, Nets, Suns. Every team that was supposed to be in it, the Bucks repeating, that's out. So I'm very interested, and I like how it relates to the Toronto Raptors because what we're seeing is switch everything, long defenders, right? Centerless basketball. There isn't a single player outside of Maxi Kleber who's taller than 6'10", who's getting
Right.
major minutes for any of these teams. So I think if you're the Raptors, you have to look at this and say, hey, the model works. We just need to fix some of the pieces.
100%. Okay, so without further ado, make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe. And check out Robert's channel as well, Pensare Basketball. This is the first trade that Robert came up with. Rob, he got the Raptors and the Spurs. Take me through your thought process and why this makes sense to you before I give you my thoughts on it.
All right, so I really like Jakob Poeltl. I think that he shores up a lot of the defensive inefficiencies the Toronto Raptors have. I know that you could probably bank on Precious Achiuwa taking a step forward as a rim protector, but I think even though you're looking at all four teams that are remaining, you're seeing them playing like smaller, and there aren't a lot of traditional centers. There's a lot of rim protection regardless, whether it's Draymond, whether it's Kevon Looney, whether it's Bam. I'm not comparing Jakob Poeltl to Rob Williams or Bam Adebayo, but he does analytically a lot of the same stuff at the rim. He doesn't shoot well. He hasn't really figured that part out, but he's familiar with Nick Nurse. Nurse was an assistant coach when Jakob was a rookie or a sophomore, and I think he just really fits what we try to do. I also think with Doug McDermott, you're taking on a contract of a player who's probably underperforming his contract right now, a slightly older player. You're giving up Trent. Ken Birch is pretty much a salary dump to make the trade match, and Malachi Flynn is a young point guard that perhaps the Spurs can develop and who desperately needs a change of scenery, in my opinion. Probably a little bit of value there for him still on his rookie contract. I think with Trent, you saw the Philadelphia 76ers really hunt him. I'm not saying Doug McDermott is a better defender. He's obviously a worse defender than Gary Trent Jr., but I think McDermott and Jakob Poeltl, you have two guys who are system players who don't need the ball to be effective. With Doug McDermott, he's a shooter off the bench. Raptors could desperately use that in spurts, maybe a 10, 15 minute a night guy who can cover up a little bit on defense.
He cuts well.
He cuts well. They're both really smart players. I know that that's a bit of a stereotype with white players. They tend to be smart players.
Smart players.
but these two really are really smart players. They're really well coached and they really know how to play. And also, I think with Trent, you don't own his bird rights because the nature of the deal that he signed was a 2+1. After this season, he has a player option, which. Masai Ujiri has gone 2 straight 45-minute press conferences. He's brought up every single player on this roster except for Trent. He has never once uttered the words Gary Trent Jr. once, even when he was asked directly about Gary Trent. So if I'm reading the tea leaves, I don't think that Masai necessarily sees this guy as a part of the future. So if you can get someone like Jakob Poeltl plus the number 9 pick in this year's draft, I think that might be a stretch. Maybe you might have to settle for a future pick. But if you could get this value haul for a guy who's coming off a career year, who maybe San Antonio sees as a good fit in a young backcourt. He's still 23 years old, next to DeJounte Murray. I think you swing for it. I really do.
Would you make this deal without the number 9 pick?
Um, no, because of Doug McDermott's contract. I don't necessarily think I want to take on
But
2
it's 2
years of
years, yeah. So it's 2
it. Two,
years, not 3.
yes, it is 2 years remaining, but you're also taking Jakob on the same thing, which is an
Which is 1
expiring
year,
deal.
right?
Exactly, it's a 1 year deal. So for those people watching at home saying, "I see 2 years," well, next year it'll be 1 year, and Jakob Poeltl will be in line for a major payday because he has drastically overperformed his contract.
What
If
would you
you're
say is
at
a major payday though? Because to me, he's still a 12 million per year max.
I think you're wrong. I think smart GMs. I think GMs lean more and more into analytics. He's still in his prime. If you're talking DeAndre Ayton versus Jakob Poeltl, they're very similar players in terms of what they do, in terms of how much value they really provide to a team, in terms of wins added. I would say they're very comparable. Actually, if you want my opinion, I think Jakob Poeltl is slightly better, and that's the crazy part. Someone out there is going to pay DeAndre Ayton a max, and if you're asking me if a team has cap space, is Jakob Poeltl worth 18 million, 17 million? I think someone who's smart should pay it. Um,
I'm not
Again, I
paying
mean,
that
this
for a
is
center.
look.
Yeah.
I get it, right? Every guy who plays in a small market gets undervalued in terms of contracts because we just don't see these guys play. And with Jakob, unfortunately, he's also
Very
playing on a
good
team
player.
that's losing. He's losing a lot, right? But he's not a reason that they're losing. If you want my honest opinion, he's not. He sets incredible picks. He's an incredible. He's very efficient offensively. Somewhat limited. He's smart. He passes the ball well. He's shown
Can't
great
shoot free
growth.
throws.
Yeah, he can't shoot free throws, but
It'll
you can
be
say
hard
that
to
about.
have him on the floor in the playoff game. It'll be extremely difficult.
Um, I don't think it's that bad. I mean, it's bad, but it's not that bad. I mean, sure, I get what you're saying, but then again, I'm not advocating for the guy to be a max player, right? But I am saying that in terms of
But 18
the
mil is a
value,
lot of money. That's like Miles Turner money. And to me, Miles Turner is a better player.
Miles Turner is underpaid, frankly, and Jakob Poeltl is a better defender than Miles Turner. You may not agree with that because the raw shot blocking
Oh,
totals
I'm
would
not saying
suggest
no,
Miles
no, no.
Turner.
Yeah, yeah,
I just think that
could be.
what Jakob does well is incredibly hard to do. He switches well out to the perimeter. He's surprisingly agile for a guy his size. He drops incredibly well. His percentages at the rim are incredible. I think if you're a smart GM out there, you really do see the value of this guy as a 25 to 26 minute per game type of plug at the center. Um, I really like Isaiah Hortenstein
Like
for the
the
Los
Clippers.
Angeles Clippers. If the Raptors could somehow find a way to get a mid-level exception, get him, then it would just totally negate any. And plus, he's a better shooter than
Yep.
Jakob. I think if they can get him, then it totally negates what I'm trying to do with Jakob Poeltl in this trade. But if he's going somewhere else, then I
I
think
still make this move though. Like to me, I still make this move without the number 9 pick. Say you get a future or just a second round pick because the Raptors are known to make good choices.
I don't know about that. I think McDermott's contract is bad enough that you should be compensated with a pick for it, to be honest. And you're not giving away nothing. You are giving away the youngest, best player in this deal. Now, I don't necessarily think that Gary Trent Jr. is better than Jakob Poeltl, but I would say his value in the NBA right now is probably higher. Shooting, as we saw with Duncan Robinson, is a premium skill. It is well rewarded. Gary Trent Jr. is a 23-year-old who's coming off 39% three-point shooting season. That is an incredible
So
value.
my
And if
question
someone
about
else,
that. So my question, you brought up a great point. We talked about this on the last podcast earlier today about how Duncan's not even playing, right? Like Max Strus has really replaced him. He's Duncan, but with like a lot of versatility and size defensively. So my question is, would Gary Trent Jr. play on the Heat?
yeah, he would. I
He'd
think
play
he would.
over
If
who
he,
though? Because he's not better than Max Strus in my opinion.
that's your opinion. I mean, look, it kind of comes
All
down
the
to fit,
analytics
right?
show that I'm right, though, right? Like if we're going analytics, like Max Strus is
Yeah,
extremely solid.
but analytics also show that Max Strus and Gary Trent Jr. play very, very different roles in their offensive sets, right? Like Gary Trent Jr. is a shot creator. Max Strus hasn't dribbled the ball 3 times all season. Okay, so we're talking about very different players who take very different roles on offense. One of them is a standstill
He's also
shooter.
not a good shooter like Max or like Duncan, though. He's a better shot creator, but he's not a better shooter, though.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so like one of the most surprising statistical parts about Gary Trent is in the rare occasions that he does pass the ball, and it is very rare. It's exceedingly rare. It's like a full moon type of situation, right?
Right. Yep.
But when he does pass the ball, the percentages on those assists and potential assists are incredible. Like when he passes the ball, it's clearly because he has sucked in 2 to 3 defenders. So the type of attention that he gets on defense, just because he has a reputation of a guy who's going to chuck it, it's incredible. We're talking like almost every player that he's passed to out of those like shot better from three on his passes than they did on Gary's or Scotty's or Pascal's. It's pretty incredible. So I think that at 23 you can bat on some upside. He's not a standstill shooter, but I do believe that the degree of difficulty on the shots that he was taking probably impact his percentages. And those percentages, by the way, aren't bad. 39% is an incredible 3-point shooting percentage. It's 5%, 4.5% over league average. That's pretty incredible given the fact that he was playing starter minutes as a 23-year-old. Look, I think it's very easy. The case to be made for him is if you put him on the bench as your sixth man, and he has a chance to go up against second units instead of going up against premier defenders every night, probably improves his percentages a lot.
That's true. That I agree with.
Yeah,
Well, that's what he is to me. I mean, he's a bench player, but we'll see. Second trade. This is a monster of a trade. This reminds me a lot of the Rudy Gay trade to the Kings, where
it's exactly
they got
exactly.
the better player, right? But and in this case, Siakam is the better player, but it's addition by subtraction where Scotty Barnes is now the guy, which opens up with Siakam not being there, and you get a lot of ancillary, really good role players. I mean, I'm talking about really good role players. DeAnthony Melton is one of the most slept-on players in the NBA without question. I mean, anytime this guy gets a chance to play extended minutes, he does a phenomenal job. Like all the analytics are in his favor, and the eye test is too because he is a very good player. Zaire Williams, we talked about him in our rookie show that we did. We like him a lot as well. Brandon Clark is a beast in my opinion. One of my favorite players coming out of Gonzaga. Tillman's a good player, and Steve-O is. He fills in the gap for that one year that you may use him in spots or not. It's always a good thing to have a big body like that. And for the Grizzlies, it's a raw moment. I think it makes a lot of sense to get Siakam to put him next to Ja. This is honestly, bro, this is like a win-win deal to me.
It is because look, I don't know if the Grizzlies realize that John Morant's window for success in the NBA is not going to be as long as players who play different styles. Okay. I have seen this show before. I've seen it with Derrick Rose. There's a lot of guys who, frankly, they're injured every single year. If you look at John Morant's games played every single year, it goes down. Okay. So the Grizzlies might now they might be looking at a guy who's one bad injury away from a.
A hundred
I hope it
percent.
doesn't happen. From a Derrick Rose type of situation, and they may look back at 2022 to 2024 and say, "Damn, we wish we had paired this guy with another guy." Now, if you're the Grizzlies, you're looking at this as the perfect trade. It's the perfect win now move. You get the best player in this draft. In the best player in this trade. You pair a rim running secondary creator, which you really don't have, to be honest. A short roller, if he can be that for them, Draymond esque, if you will. You have a guy who can sort of initiate your offense
Right.
in those games that Morant will inevitably miss, and he has shown that he can be a first option. So to have that guy as your second option, John Morant as your first option, then you have Desmond Bain and Jaren Jackson Jr., Dylan Brooks. Like
Jaren
that's
Jackson with
stacked.
Siakam is a perfect pairing to me.
It is, and Jaren
So
Jackson
good.
is like, and you can play five out. Like that's the crazy part, right? Because with
100%.
Steven Adams, one of the things that they traded Jonas Valanciunas to free up the paint for Ja Morant. In Pascal Siakam, you're getting a guy who shoots 34, 35% from three. He has shot as high as, I believe, 37% in some seasons. Jaren Jackson Jr., similar skill set. You can space both those guys out. There's defensive versatility there. I know that, I've been very critical of Siakam as a defender. So I don't think he necessarily dials in as much as he should. But I think that a lot of that has to do with his offensive load. If you lessen his load, he goes right back to I think in a weird way, you get a much better version of the second option Siakam that we had for the championship run. I'm not saying Ja Morant is necessarily Kawhi Leonard, but he's a first option superstar
It's pretty good.
when healthy. Um, I just think that this is an incredible deal for the Raptors. Now, I know a lot of Raptor fans are going to say, "Who the hell are
Right.
these players?" And I'll tell you, as someone who intently watched the Grizzlies this season as one of my favorite teams,
20 and
you're
5 without Morant. There's no
yeah,
secret to this.
yeah, 20-5. I think Desmond Bain, the curse that will haunt the Raptors forever and ever and ever, because they picked Malachi Flynn over him because he had short arms. Look, I mean, it's the truth. Like it's the truth. There's no reason that you make that draft pick other than And honestly, Desmond Bain. I mean, like you're talking about a team that only drafts for wingspan. You're talking about a guy
Bro,
who has
he's
negative
he's
wingspan.
strong. I've never seen a guy with like that type of biceps and like shoot the ball the way he does.
Short arms are good for shooting. First of all,
Oh well, there you go.
Fred VanVleet would attest. Fred VanVleet would attest to that. So, I think for the Raptors, you fill out your entire bench. You get Brandon Clark, Canadian boy, right? Still right before his prime, 25 years old.
He's a good
I
player.
think he's incredibly productive. I think he
Yep.
fits in offensively, incredibly efficient. You get a rim running threat. You get a 6'8" guy. Raptors love those 6'8", 6'9" guys with long arms. Brandon Clark is
Do,
that.
do you think he's
Um,
better than Precious Achua? Because I think he's. It's so hard. Like they're both good.
he's significantly better. He just happens to be
Yeah,
older and far
I
further
think he's
along.
better.
I think
Yeah,
Precious's two-way potential makes me more bullish on Precious going forward. But if you're the Raptors, you're looking at this as, Precious Achua plus, right? Plus Brandon Clark plus Zaire Williams. Like you are talking about like in one trade, you basically trade away the oldest player in this deal. I think Siakam and Adams are both 28 years old, right?
sure.
For Adams, Adams serves a need as well. I mean, every one of these players serves a need. And in Tillman, you get a young prospect. In Zaire Williams, you get an ex lottery pick who I probably would say should have gone 15 to 18. They reached for him at 10, whatever. He played minutes this year. DeAnthony Melton, as you
P-
said,
yeah,
really, really good player.
and like people don't know this about Tillman. Tillman did an excellent job when Jaren Jackson was out. Like he was literally their starter, playing big time minutes, contributing to winning. He can stretch the floor out. He's a Villanova guy. Like all these dudes from that school, they know how to play basketball.
They really do.
So yeah, I think Tillman fits a need. He's much better than Birch. Like that's not even close. I think Tillman is better. And again, Raptor fans, they don't watch enough basketball outside of Canada, unfortunately, and they'll say that guys like Boucher is better than Tillman, which we know is not true.
No,
Um,
I think he is. He is better.
they'll
Come on.
say I don't think so. I think Tillman's pretty good. He does the exact same thing, but he's better and he's more fundamentally strong, and he's stronger too. Again, Melton is. I mean, it's a good trade,
I
man.
think the real upside here is that this pretty much like you're getting five players in these players back, none of whom are extremely ball dominant. They're all system guys. They all plug in. And for a coach like Nick Nurse who rode his starters into the ground this past year, I think what you're getting really is depth. And the Raptors have done a deal like this before, and that's what started the We the North era, right? And that was the trade for Rudy Gay.
Rudy
Now
Gay.
I think Pascal Siakam is significantly better than
Yeah.
Rudy Gay, like a significantly better player. He's probably going to make an All NBA team. He's 28. He's right in the middle of his prime. I think the reason you do this is really for balance, because really, as well as Pascal and Scotty played off of each other this year, and as much as I would like to think that the two of them can play well going forward, I do think that you need to find a way to balance out this roster, and you need to find a way to get Scotty up in that pecking order earlier. Because I would rather lose 5 more games with Scotty Barnes, getting those reps. And these are the types of decisions that organizations need to make, right?
Long term.
There are a lot of organizations that have traded away very, very good players in their prime to clear the runway for an ascending star. Um, and they're not popular trades at the time, right? Vlade Divac's going for Kobe Bryant. That was not a popular trade. You're trading away an all-star, basically, for a teenager out of high school who's 17, 18 years old. Um, I don't necessarily think. I think for the Raptors side, it's like, what could these players become in this type of development system? What could a Zaire Williams become under Nick Nurse's
He
tutelage?
could be a
Right?
monster.
He could be, right? And, and
Yeah.
and it's like you're basically picking up 4 lottery balls here and a fifth if you add the pick, right? And you're just giving into the system. But unlike the lottery balls that you have with Delano Banton and et cetera, these guys are already NBA rotation players. They've proven it on a very, very good team in the West, right? So I think the
Okay.
baseline's a little bit higher. So
So
yeah,
would you trade the number 4 pick and Rashawn Holmes for Pascal Siakam?
no. Wait, no, not the number 4 pick. If y'all had the number 2 pick,
I
I
would
would
never
say
give up
yes.
number 2 for Siakam, though. I would never do that. He's not worth a number 2 pick.
I
You
think
said it
it really.
yourself. He's not. He's not a number 1, and you said it multiple. He's not a number 2. So how does a guy like that go under a top 3 pick in any draft? I don't care how weak it is. He doesn't. Like, realistically speaking, he doesn't.
I mean, okay, like where are we at with Siakam right now, right? Like he didn't have a bad playoffs. I think he had a decent playoff showing, right? I don't think he was necessarily worse than he was in the regular season and the playoffs, and that's a very good thing because obviously Fred VanVleet being out or a shell of himself, Gary Trent Jr., facing that illness, Scotty Barnes on one ankle, it really was Siakam, right? That the defenses were gearing up for, and he had a
For
pretty
sure.
decent series. So I think that he has proven that he's past the bubble stage. He has an off season to improve. I think there's still upside with Siakam. I really do. I think he'll get better. He got COVID earlier this year, and apparently he lost like 15 pounds. I think that probably hurt him a little bit. So, again, I expect. Look, if the Raptors keep Siakam, I'll tell you right now, he's going to have a better year next year than he did last year. The trading of Siakam in both trades that I've suggested trading him has nothing to do with Siakam being a bad player. I just don't necessarily want to see 2 more years of Pascal Siakam run offenses because I know that he's not a number 1 guy. And I think that Scotty can be that number 1 guy. And I would rather allow Scotty to have all of these ancillary pieces around him, shooters, cutters, guys who move without the ball,
You
just
put
better system
Sharp,
fit.
who is 6'6" with a 7-foot above wingspan, as the youngest player
Six
in the
five,
draft,
6'5".
with a guy like Scotty Barnes, who can shoot, who
Okay,
can create his
so
own shot. That's crazy to
so
me.
I have a lot of questions about Shaden Sharp, and we can get to
Yeah,
that when we talk about the
that's for a
number.
different show.
Yeah.
I'm just okay. So trade number 3, Raptors-Magic. This one is let's see. This one's interesting. So the Raptors would be getting Jonathan Isaac, Markel
Mm-hmm.
Fultz, Terrence Ross, Chuma Okiki, who I like a lot, by the way, and the number 1 pick, okay,
Yep.
for Siakam and Van Vliet. Yeah, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, you might not, but Weltman
The
might see it
Magic won't do
differently.
that.
You don't know that. Look, this is a
They're not
team
doing
that
that.
has been in no man's land for so long. They have so many of these, sixth, seventh, fifth guy type of players. Look at that roster. Like, really look at it. Wendell Carter Jr., Mo Bamba, Cole Anthony. I
I'm not
mean,
going to
you
put
are
Cole
Franz
Anthony
Wagner.
and Fred Van Vliet together like the shortest
Well,
backcourt in NBA history. No. I'm not doing that.
Okay,
And you wouldn't do that either. I know you too well.
obviously you would probably be you would make this trade assuming that Suggs is going to start next to Fred VanVleet. That
Yeah.
probably that you would have Wendell Carter starting next to Siakam and
Yeah.
probably
That's
Franz Wagner, right?
that's not a bad
Now,
starting five at all.
exactly, it's an immediate playoff team. That's what I'm talking about. Like you immediately make it to the playoffs, and what are you really giving up? You're giving up a number one overall pick, which I mean,
Who could be
honestly,
Chet? Who
who
could be
could
Chet?
right? Who could be Chet? Who could be Jabari Smith Jr.? Who could be a bust? Right? Like we have seen this many times. Like look, there are two types of drafts. Okay, there are drafts like the Tim Duncan draft where there is a clear number one, and that value of that pick is like two superstars. Like you're not giving up Tim Duncan in the Tim Duncan draft, like that like you couldn't have traded that pick for Michael Jordan at that time. Like you would have gotten nothing. That was the most valuable asset in the NBA. Okay, there's and then there are drafts where there isn't a clear number one guy. There's drafts like this one where you're debating three guys for number one, which means clearly one guy has not separated himself. And you can hype yourself up about Chet Holmgren. You would probably agree that he's probably a worse prospect than Scotty Barnes or Evan Mobley, which means that if Chet
Agreed.
Holmgren had come out last year, that's a number five pick. So Jabari Smith Jr., same thing. Like you're not telling me Jabari Smith Jr. is going top six last year. Okay. Paolo, probably the same thing. I get it. Like a lot of guys can get hyped, and it's a relative system, right? With the draft, like everyone gets hyped about the draft. I'm just telling you that not all number one picks are built equal. I think this is a beauty is in the eye of the beholder thing. If you're looking at this from the Orlando Magic perspective, why do you do it? You're giving up basically nothing. I mean, Terrence Ross is a negative asset. Markel Fultz, I probably argue, is overpaid. They looked good with him, but he's often injured, and I think you're cashing out high. Jonathan Isaac hasn't played for you in 2 years. If he comes back and he's not good, like you're sitting on 3 years, 50-55 million for a guy who hasn't really proven a hell of a lot in this league. Has a lot of off-court issues, according to some people. Like I like him, but some people might say, "Hey, he's anti-vax. He doesn't stand for he doesn't kneel." Like there's some issues here, and I don't even know if the Raptors, given how progressive they are socially, would ever take on a guy who isn't vaccinated and who didn't kneel. Right? Like there are teams like that
But
who
when
have that
he's
kind of culture.
healthy, holy moly, and especially in Raptors culture, you're talking about a but oh my gosh. I can't
Hey,
I'm not gonna
I
say
like
it.
Jonathan. I like Jonathan Isaac, but what I'm looking at here is you're talking about two All Stars for the number one overall pick. I think this is a steal for the Magic. I think Raptor fans will hate this trade because they're looking at it like you're giving up two All Stars in their prime, and very easy to argue that next year both these guys could be All Stars. Fred VanVleet was injured half the year. If he wasn't injured half the year, like if he had replicated his first half production into his second half, you'd be talking about an All NBA guy potentially, right?
Yeah, but he
Potentially. Like a
didn't.
fringe All NBA. Okay, yeah, but he got injured. Okay, like he got injured because he was playing 39, 40 minutes a night. He was leading the league in minutes in a very, very tough system. I mean, bodies do break down, right? So you could
Yeah,
argue,
Kyrie didn't play. That's an all-star. To me, he's not an all-star. I think Siakam is an All NBA type
look,
talent, but
you and I are in agreement that Pascal Siakam is probably fringe top 25 players, and Fred
yep.
VanVleet is not an All Star. But for the Raptors right now, what you are trading is effectively two All Stars for question mark, a dead weight contract, and a young player who has pretty much proven that he's a one-way player, right? Okiki is a terrible offensive player who pretty much has all of his value on defense. Could the Raptors develop his shot? I don't know. All this is really is about clearing the way for Scotty, right? So for the Raptors, number one overall pick, you're probably picking between Chet and Jabari Smith Jr.
You're picking
And
Chet without question.
I mean, probably the Raptors would
Yeah.
pick Chet.
Yeah.
I do, however, see the upside of, and I also think you get younger, right? Isaac is younger than Siakam. I think fundamentally he's a much better defensive player. Um, I think Okiki has potential off the bench. I think Ross can be moved as an expiring contract, and I think Markel Fultz is redeemable. I like Markel Fultz. I actually like him. I'm probably one of
Me
those
too.
rare
He's
people who
a
still
good
like
player.
his game. He is a good
Yeah.
player, and
Yeah, he
like when
is.
he's healthy, he's been good. And I like the fact that he kind of fits what the Raptors do. I think he has potential defensively. Um, yeah, and he's a smart player. He's a really smart player, and yeah.
All right. So trade number cuatro, number 4, the Raptors and the Pistons, Jeremy Grant and the twin of Marvin Bagley and Livers. I really thought that was Bagley. I was like, oh gosh, but then it said Livers. So I'm like, okay. For Gary Trent and Kim Birch. I
Yeah.
think I'm not doing it if I'm the Raptors because if I'm the Raptors, I can go to Sacramento and be like, I'll trade you Jeremy Grant number 5 for number 4, which is essentially what they want to do anyway. Because Jeremy Grant has
You
a
mean
lot
if
of value
you're
league
the
wide.
you mean if you're the Pistons, you're
Yeah,
not
if
doing
I'm the
this.
Pistons. No, yeah, I'm not doing
Well,
it.
I mean, look, you're trading Jeremy Grant, who
Who has
obviously
a lot of value league wide.
he's an
Because,
expiring contract. So you're expiring. Sorry, like your value perception of him is based on what people wanted him at the deadline. I think you might see a slightly different valuation for him going into next season because, right, he's not a restricted free agent anymore. He could just walk. He can walk to the highest bidder, and his player type is an extremely valuable player type, a switchable, 3-4 guy who can guard multiple positions,
mm-hmm.
respectable shot. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about you're going to have this guy for 1 year, and then he could bounce. Like he's an unrestricted free agent. You don't have the right to match, so you are taking a risk trading for this guy, especially if you're trading assets for him, right? So you talk about Detroit trying to move up one spot and getting off of him when this is a draft that pretty much flatlines at 4. I mean, that's you're kind of telling me right there that he doesn't have a hell of a lot of value, right? Because you're talking about a guy that the Pistons brought in and thought he might be their first
Flat
option.
lines at 4 is subjective because a lot of teams are in love with Ivy or with Sharp. I mean, it's already well known
Well,
that a
well,
lot of
right
these teams are
there you
willing
have
to like give up assets for like those two players.
I've seen 7 different players listed at 4 and 5. Okay, so I think between picks 4 and pick 9, you could pretty much jumble that order however the hell you want. I think it's similar to the last year when we had that range, which was Kaminga, Scotty Barnes, Josh Giddey. Well, maybe Josh Giddey wasn't really in that like that sort of range, right? Where you could shuffle it a bit. I think you could probably talk yourself into Shaden Sharp at number 3 if you really wanted to,
You
right?
can.
Measurements are off the charts. Potential, he's a young player. Or you could probably talk yourself into him having off-court issues and that he deserves to go number 8. You could really reverse it either way you want it to, right? There are more proven players. He hasn't played a single minute of college basketball. You have no proof at all, other than I think U18 with Canada and high school, where he played against high schoolers, right? So, I mean, there's questions. Like, I think a lot of GMs had a lot of questions about him when that news broke about him potentially testing the waters this year, about why he didn't play. So, yeah, I think you might be, again, someone will rise, and the combine happened today, and we're already seeing some Shaden Sharp hype right now. But yeah, I mean, and to stick to the point, Jeremy Grant, I think it makes sense, right? Like, I think it still makes sense for the Raptors. I think you get a year to
Oh,
try out Jeremy Grant.
this is an amazing deal for the Raptors.
Well, I wouldn't say it's an amazing deal for the Raptors. You're giving up the youngest player in this draft. The youngest player in this trade. Gary Trent Jr. has 1 year left before he opts into the player option. I think you get the better defender in Grant. I think you get the better fit.
You,
Also, one
you get the better
underrated fact:
player, 100%.
23 years old versus
100%. We're talking
okay,
about
okay,
now though. Like we're talking about now.
yeah,
This
but
guy
you
has
can't
put up 25 points, yeah, on a bad team, but
you can't compare Jeremy Grant as fifth option in Denver, uh, you know, uh, to Gary Trent as second or third option in Toronto. Toronto is a better team. Trent's younger. I think you could talk yourself
Toronto
into
was a
Trent.
better team than the Nuggets.
When are we talking about? What Jeremy Grant, when was what like, he was like fourth, fifth option, right? Third,
Right,
fourth, fifth option, right?
right.
So he's never had that type of offensive load. And the year that he did have an offensive load that even closely mirrored, the usage rate that Gary Trent was at this year, he was on a lottery team. He was like on the worst team in the league. That's the team that got K'd last year, right? So I think we have seen that he's not a first option or a second option. He's a tertiary or a fourth option on a team. And that's what the Raptors would be getting him for. And that's what any team would be trading for right now is a fourth piece, a third, fourth piece on a good
But a
team.
6'8" versatile player that there's a bunch of Gary Trents in the draft. There's a bunch of Gary Trents league
I
wide.
don't I don't think like look, I'm
An
probably
undersized
the
an undersized unathletic guard
he's
who
not
is a good
undersized.
shooter, not a great
He's
shooter by the
six
way.
he's 6'5" with a 6'9" wingspan. He's not undersized. He's not undersized. For a shooting guard, he's not undersized. He guards up a position. And you remember in Portland, he played with Damon CJ. He guarded threes and he was decent.
And
And
they
this
got
year he took
toasted.
his
And that
and
team
not
got
because of
toasted.
him. He played well. In both times Gary Trent Jr. has been in the playoffs, he's played extremely well. This year, the first two games notwithstanding, because he was sick and he could barely stay on the floor. You take those two games out in games 3, 4, 5, and 6, he was decent. Okay, and he's 23 years old. I think you might be underselling the value of Gary Trent Jr. because you don't like him. I don't like him either, but I do objectively see the
I'm not
value of how
underselling
much
them.
guys like him get paid. And you know what? He has a player option for I want to say 19 million at the end of next season, and I don't think the Raptors will have his bird rights, so they can't like go over to sign him. Because it's a 2-year deal, right? And then the bird rights kick in after 3 years. So if you opt out on a 2-year deal, I don't think you have the bird rights, and he'd be an unrestricted free agent. So if I'm the Raptors, I'm looking at this like, okay, this guy's going to hijack our offense, probably, take 25, 26% usage next year, score 20 points, opt out of his deal, and then go to the highest contender, right? So I'd rather cash out on that, to be honest, because I don't see a way in hell that you can afford to pay this guy.
But I've seen Jeremy Grant be the fourth best player, fifth best player on the team that made it to the Western Conference Finals, and that fits the exact role you need him to fit. Like his value is so valuable that no way in hell league wide, if you ask 30 GMs would they make that deal, every single one would say hell no because Gary Trent is replaceable on so many levels. Like what he provides for you, I can replace with like Clarkson in a heartbeat, like without
I mean,
question.
consider the optics of this. Gary Trent Jr. was traded for Norman Powell. Okay, Norman Powell was the fourth option on a team that was borderline Eastern Conference Finals, like one shot away against
Norman
Boston, and they
Powell's
were
a
going to be
better player. Norman Powell's a
then
better
Gary
player.
Trent Jr.
Yes, without question.
I don't think so, dude. Norman Powell's a better shooter. Norman Powell is probably better on offense, but Norman Powell is a pylon on defense, and he's undersized, and he's older, and he's paid more now on a longer deal. I think you might be. Look, Gary Trent Jr. had a stretch of like I think almost 10, 11 games where he's scoring like 30 points per game this year, man. He really did have a hot streak here, and I don't know. I mean, he's 23 years old. I don't think you can undersell that. Like, guys do not hit their prime in the NBA, and he's a really hard worker. Like, he has actually improved. He bought in on the defensive end. I think every Raptor fan who's paying attention would tell you this guy took 5 steps forward on defense, which is really hard to do while doing what he was doing on offense, while being 23 years old. The only reason that I don't necessarily want this guy around next year is because I think he takes too many shots and I don't see him as a long-term fit because I don't think we can afford him. So it's like if it's a rental, I'd rather take the rental on a less disruptive fit, you know? And
Which is
also
why
I
it's
think
so much more valuable. That's my point.
value is in the eye of the beholder, man. Like, I mean, if you offer the Lakers a number 2 pick right now, I don't think it's as valuable to them as it is to the Sacramento Kings, right? So it's like you gotta scale value based on who's holding the asset. So for the Raptors, right, taking an older player when you're when the guy you're building around is 20 years old doesn't necessarily make sense. I just think that Jeremy Grant is a better fit with the Raptors, especially, like next to, like, I just think it, like, look,
You
with the
think Gary
Raptors,
Trent's a better player than Jeremy Grant? That's egregious.
it's close. It's close. It's close. It's really close. I think you're really overstating the value of Jeremy Grant, man. And this is coming from a certified Gary Trent hater. Like, I do not like Gary Trent Jr. at all. But
He was not like Jeremy Grant either, because that's crazy to
I like
me.
Jeremy Grant. I like
Jeremy
Jeremy
Grant
but
provides excellent weak side rim protection, which is not stated enough because he plays on the Pistons. But if that guy is engaged, especially how he would be engaged in Raptors culture, you're getting a player that's supremely better than Gary Trent Jr. Like let's
on
not
a
kid
one-year
ourselves.
contract at 28 years old. Like, well, you have to look. You cannot value a 23-year-old the same way you value a 28-year-old. You just can't. Like, you cannot. You can't do that.
This
Like,
is a 6'5", 23-year-old. That's a shot chucker that should be coming off a bench.
Some people could argue Jeremy Grant in 1 year
What are
should
we
be coming
saying
off the
there?
bench. But you're talking about a guy who is 2 years into his prime versus a guy who's 3 years away from his prime. You cannot compare.
Gary Trent Jr. is who he is, bro. Like, he's not like.
But that's not true because we have seen improvements every single year from Gary Trent Jr. He has improved his 3-point percentage. He has improved his ability to dribble the ball. I'm sorry. Like,
what's he going to be then?
What's he going to be?
Yeah.
Jordan Clarkson, like that type of player.
Sixth man. Okay, go ahead.
Sure.
Who else? So we're talking about an actual starter on a championship team versus a realistically sixth man that Raptor fans overrate because he had a good stretch.
You say Raptor fans, but you know damn well that I don't overrate him. I do not like the guy. Right?
You don't, but I'm just saying the majority of the fan base
But even as I don't like him, it's not like I'm not blind to him, right? I'm not blind to what he's doing. Like, I understand what he's doing. I understand his deficiencies. I understand that the Sixers basically targeted him in pick and rolls time and time and time again and ISO'd the crap out of him. I get all that.
You ain't targeting Jeremy Grant like that. I promise you that.
Yeah, but Jeremy Grant is not doing on offense. Like, Jeremy Grant is not a 39% three-point shooter. He's not the shooter that Gary Trent Jr. is.
He's a 36%, but he's a 36 who has a real good mid-range shot.
Okay.
And that put up 25 points on a bad team. So he's capable of actually being very efficient, by the way.
Who do you think got the most points per possession on isolations this year for the Raptors?
Fred VanVleet.
Not even close. He was terrible in isolations. It was Gary Trent Jr. Gary Trent Jr. Was, I believe, it was, okay, I have to tell you, I checked this around the 60-game mark. It might have dropped off after that point, but he was the most efficient isolation scorer for the Raptors. That is a very valuable skill set, and also why he's actually good in the playoffs. I think you might be, and by the way, Jeremy Grant's isolation scoring is nowhere near that. So, look, I can't believe that we are at a point where I'm defending Gary Trent Jr. in this trade, but I am. I am telling you, at 23 years old, he doesn't finish well at the rim. He's not a great defender. Yes, Raptor fans, even though he made great improvements on defense, he is still by far the worst defender in this team starting lineup. I get all of that. There's a lot he can't do, okay? But what he can do is extremely valuable. It's extremely valuable.
Okay, so let's move on to number 5. Last one before we end this. Raptors-Rockets is interesting. Eric Gordon, Şengün, Garuba for VanVleet and Malachi Flynn.
Yeah.
I'm going to say no way in hell just because VanVleet doesn't fit their timeline. I get it.
I think it accelerates their timeline.
I get it,
really
but
does.
Şengün would be a monster with the Raptors. Garuba would be I mean, if there's a perfect place for Garuba, it's definitely Toronto, especially with the ties with Messiah. And then Eric Gordon provides. See, honestly, bro, and this is how much I'm not high on Trent. Eric Gordon in the playoffs is a better player than Trent Jr. Like, he would have helped them so much more this year than Gary Trent, because Eric Gordon's actually a good defender when you really look at it. In
Not
the
a chance in
playoffs, I'm
hell.
talking about in the playoffs. Eric Gordon, when he's healthy, he's a hell of a basketball player, but he's never
He
healthy.
is.
So
Well, the best ability is availability, as I have said
sure,
more times than I can count. I think, like with the Rockets, like you have a very, very, very good player in Jalen Green. Okay, I think Fred VanVleet and Jalen Green fit so well together. Fred's a very good defender as a point guard. He's not super long, etc., but he is the type of guy who can provide some veteran leadership that you're probably not getting from John Wall right now. Um, I think that the Rockets have enough in by way of cap space or I think John Wall's expiring next year, right? I'm not
yep.
sure, but if you can move that contract, you can quickly accelerate this rebuild. Obviously, they're probably pretty high on Şengün. They might be pretty high on Garuba, but to be honest, I mean, they have Christian Wood. They could look to move him for
They
something.
will.
I'm not
They
sure.
will. He's not
Yeah,
part of their
so
plans.
sure. So I mean, like, what is Şengün? Some people have said Nikola Jokic. I don't see it at all.
No.
I see maybe at best Domantas Sabonis, and Sabonis was, I believe, the 12th pick for the Thunder. He got shipped, and I don't know. I think Fred VanVleet just fits in really well as a culture driver. He provides a lot of, you can say championship pedigree. You can say, it's something that sells to your fan base, at least in Houston. They've been losing for a while now, right? Since
This
John
makes the
Wall left.
Raptors better by
No, it
a
doesn't
lot.
at all. It doesn't at all.
Oh, it
It
does.
makes you
It does.
younger. It gives you two shots at a decent big, right? Now, I don't necessarily, I think what I like about, like, I don't necessarily think, okay, look, in Şengün, you're getting not a great shooter, right? In Garuba, you're getting a non shooter pretty much, right? Like, he's not a great shooter. So I worry about the fit with Scotty, you know. So I think in Garuba and Şengün, I think that's your backup. That's your backup bigs, pretty much your 4 or 5 on the bench. You are giving up the best player in this trade by a country mile. Absolutely, Fred VanVleet.
So, are
The
you starting
analytics,
Burst over Şengün?
no, you would start Precious. You would start Precious over these guys, and then you would let these guys, get their or if Garuba, I think it's just internal competition, right? At this point, yeah. So you're getting like, what's the value here, right? For the Rockets, it's great value. You're getting an all-star for the number 16, and what was Garuba last year? Number 22, 23, something like that pick, right? So I mean, it's a fair value. There's look if it's kind of like the curse of young players, right? If they work out, there's no way you can afford to sign them all, right? Um, so I don't know. I think look, I would be worried about um, I think what we're seeing with Zion, what we're seeing with guys like this is that there's no guarantee of 6 years anymore with young players, especially young players who have the type of following that Jalen Green has, right? So while I do not see any indication that a guy like him would want to move on from the Rockets, I do think 2, 3, 4 years of just rebuilding and losing, it can really sour a brand really quickly, and we're seeing that, right? So I think with someone like Fred VanVleet, you do bring in a culture driver, someone who brings stability to that locker room. Hopefully, it can initiate at least some sort of let's win. Let's at least try for a plan. And I think
I
for the
don't think they
Raptors, it
want to do
just
that right now. I just
why
think
not?
they're in. Why not? Because they're gonna
Where are they
draft
drafting this year? Number 3.
number 3,
Uh,
which
so
they'll
so they're
probably
gonna
be bad again.
okay, but I mean with Fred VanVleet, right? With a decent signing, with trading, if I was the GM and
In the
my owner
West,
gave
no, they're not making a plan.
look, everyone is saying that the league is going to be so much better next year. Kawhi is going to come back. Ben Simmons is going to play. Yes, every single time we project forward, there's always this hypothetical situation in which the league is 1,000 times better. Russell Westbrook turns back the clock, et cetera, et cetera. But, do you want to be the worst team in the league 3 years in a row with a player
They
like Jalen
do.
Green? You think they want to be that bad?
Yeah.
And then next year they want to be like number one in the Victor Wembanyama, or I don't know how you say his last name,
Yes, they do.
sweepstakes.
They do.
And they want to get Scoot Henderson. I don't know. I think like I don't know how you see the fit with KPJ and Jalen Green.
I love KPJ, but the problem is he's not there mentally. Like talent wise, he's insane. Like he's so talented, but he's not there mentally, and I'll be the first to attest that. So we'll see what happens with them. This is a huge year for him. This is like a make it or break it year, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there's a hallmark of like all these trades. Basically, they are with Scotty in mind, right?
Yeah.
Every one of these trades had Scotty Barnes in mind. Moving forward, trying to get the ball in his hands, as we've seen with Giannis, with Luka, with Jason Tatum. I don't know if you or anyone sees Scotty on that level, but if you do, then there is established evidence that getting the ball in his hands sooner will accelerate his development a little bit better. So I see it.
There it is, yo. Well, we appreciate you guys for tuning in. People that watch this after, I forgot to tag all the Raptors tags and stuff like that. So, anyways, thank you guys. Van Hoot, Robert answered the question earlier. You guys should follow Pensare Basketball YouTube channel. Links are in the description. Robert, I appreciate you as always. This is always fun. There's always going to be a fun debate because people love to overrate their own players. I'm not saying you. I'm just saying I'm generalizing that to like Kings fans, Raptor fans. Like, they think Harrison Barnes.
Oh, you don't think Scotty Barnes is the next Michael Jordan? Because I do. I'm just kidding.
You might actually think that. All right, man. I appreciate you. Thank you guys so much again. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This will be available on all podcast platforms, iTunes, Spotify. You know where to catch us, man. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.